Witches in Pursuit of Science.
Oh, hello. How are you doing today? You look so beautiful.
Oh my gosh, thank you, and good day to you. Blessed be, Sister Witch.
Good day.
And blessed be all my witches, glitches, and little hitches out there. We hope you're doing well. Welcome to Witches in Pursuit of Science. I'm Angelina.
And I'm Nicole.
And today we are talking about bum ba bum 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 bum. But wait, I gotta get it. Got it. Oh no, don't fall off now.
Today's the day.
My favorite day. Do you know what this is? This is
Gayle.
This is my pet snail.
Look at her.
Adorable.
Oh, she's so cute.
She's just a little, for all of our viewers who are listening wherever you get your podcasts and not watching on YouTube, I have on this piece of bamboo a tiny Japanese trapdoor snail named Gayle. My sister gave her to me for Christmas, and I keep her in a beautifully crafted biosphere that my buddy and I worked on to ensure that she gets plenty of oxygen in her enclosure. When she gets a little bit bigger, I am going to have to take her out of the biosphere and put her in a larger tank. But right now, she's just a little baby. So she likes to live on lettuce, and she has a Japanese moss ball she likes to sleep on top of. And she has an aquatic fern and some duckweed growing in there, as well as a couple of pieces of bamboo. Japanese trapdoor snails actually can live up to 15 years, which is like really cool. You think about a snail. And It's interesting. Yeah, there's so much about snails. I am actually geeked for today's episode.
I am so excited. You know what? I realized I got something to show you. So I actually have one of Gayle's ancestors.
Oh, stop!
Right here. It's my favorite rock. It's an ammonite, which is a very, very ancient version of a snail. Way back when this little guy or gal lived somewhere in the oceans that covered Texas thousands and thousands of years ago. And when I was little, the field behind my house used to be sunflowers and cows because, yeehaw, Texas. And then they bulldozed it over in the name of suburbia and to build houses. And so when all they did that and the dirt was up, I went digging for cool rocks. And this is my most prized rock that I've had since I was a wee sprout. And so I wanted to share it with you.
That is so beautiful and special, and honestly an amazing find. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Fun fact about the great grandparent of Gayle that you have there. Snails are hermaphrodites, so that means that they have the potential to be both male and female. And most of the time when they get developed into maturity, which can take about 3 to 5 years when they're in the wild, or like 10 to 15 years even when they're in captivity, they'll end up breeding with another snail, and they can choose, whichever they want to. And then they do something else that's crazy. Once a snail breeds, they actually store the other counterpart's sperm within them for up to 2 years. And in that time, whenever they find the right conditions, get this, whenever they find finally the right conditions where they're like, oh shoot, I'll have a baby, they end up going in themselves, using that other partner's juices, we'll say, and creating snail babies. And that's actually how we got Gayle, was that my sister had a wild, so Japanese trapdoor snails here in Michigan are a really bad invasive species. They end up similar to an apple snail. They end up getting really, really big, and they're just crowding our lakes. They're choking out other fish. They're just taking over.
Oh,
so
yeah.
She's gone out there one day, and she ended up rescuing this snail from the lake. And Gayle's mom looks like a mean Italian, like mafia snail. This snail has, I wish I had a picture. Imagine a snail with a big snidely whiplash mustache, like coming out of his face, and he looks like he's about to tie somebody to a railroad track. Like the snail was good. We thought it was a boy snail, and then all of a sudden one day, snail had babies. Alyssa shows up, and my sister shows up, and she's like, "Hey, I got you a snail for Christmas because I like love it. And so stuff we want to talk about today is snails. So I want to know, I guess my question for today is how did snails get such a bad rap in witchcraft? And why does everybody hate them so much? Like it's kind of like Smash Mouth. Everybody suddenly was like, it's not cool anymore. What? Everybody hates Smash Mouth. Smash Mouth's awesome, okay? I'll listen to Rockstar like 10 times.
Hey now.
Get your game on, okay? Like, I want to know how snails got so hated. I want to know why, because people talk about we eat them, we use them in the beauty industry, we have them in the wild, and it's actually a species that's going extinct. So, want to jump in?
Yeah. Well, I have
Let's
really
get right
hard
to the
time.
history of snails. Just so, like, so I'm asking you as a scientist, do you know anything about like the history of snails, or where like a little bit more about where they are?
Oh, yes, I certainly do. So, snails are classified as a gastropod, and they belong to the phylum Mollusca or mollusks. So, you typically think of mollusks as like sea creatures. But what that means is that they have a soft, unsegmented body, and they sometimes are covered with an exoskeleton, like a shell, or in the case of a slug, they don't have an exoskeleton. They are just this soft, unsegmented body, which is essentially like one big muscle. So snails have one big muscle, and it's like a big giant foot. And so they just kind of their way along with their foot.
Yeah.
Other types of mollusks you might recognize are squids, octopi, clams, cuttlefish, you name it. All of those squishy, muscular type of aquatic animals.
Gastropods.
Gastropods.
It's too wild. When I think of a mollusk, I only think of a mussel or a clam. I wouldn't think of anything soft or moving around. And when you mentioned how snails move on that foot, I learned a really interesting meme that I actually sent to Wifey this morning. And it was all about if you pick up a snail straight up and down, you're doing it wrong and you're hurting the snail. You have to push the snail along and get it to like let go of its foot. Or what you're doing is imagine if you were like sticking your tongue to something to move along and push it, and somebody all of a sudden just ripped it right off.
Oh.
Like if you were on an ice pole. Okay, stick your tongue to an ice pole. Imagine sliding it up and down to get it off if you heated up the pole with your mouth and were able to move, right? You could move it off or then pull it off. If somebody just grabbed your mouth that was stuck to your tongue that was stuck to an ice pole and then just ripped it off, how much would that hurt?
I don't think I'd have a tongue left.
Right. When we see snails in the wild and we go to pick them up, whether it's off of a rock, on the ground, you want to gently push it to move that mollusk until it either will curl up in itself and go in its shell, or it'll release the retraction of the foot and let go. But you never want to just directly vertically pick it up off the ground because you could really do some damage to the animal. And the hard thing is that we wouldn't realize it. So
that is so good to know. I didn't, that's like new knowledge to me. I didn't know that. And that's so good to know because snails are actually an endangered species along the long list of all the other endangered species like frogs and elephants and, everything because we're destroying our planet. But snails are endangered and they're so important to the ecosystem. Even though they can't hear anything, they can only see and smell and move around on their little foot. They are really important to the ecosystem and they help, keep that circle of life going. They help, the process of turning dirt or, what am I trying to say here?
they're important.
They are important. They digest plant matter and turn it into soil. They're very good and they're very good. But they also are a big food source for birds and fish and other critters. And so and some of them are even carnivores themselves. So they're a very diverse type of species out there. And they've been around for so long, like 500 million years ago was when we see the very first fossils from the first gastropods. So I think when you put that into perspective, that there's this organism, there's this species that existed for 500 million years, And now here we are in the short span of the Industrial Revolution, we might completely remove them from the face of the earth. I think it's really important to reflect on our practices and our ways of life and perhaps make some choices that is good for all the organisms that we share our home with, not just ourselves. I'll get off my environmental protection soapbox and we can continue with snails, but you know.
Save the snails!
Save the snails!
Save them!
Snails!
Like, we need a sign that just says save fucking everything. You know, like we're just gonna save it all.
Save them.
We've all lived selfish, horrible human lives. We are the worst species to ever encounter this planet, and I don't care if it's an unpopular opinion. It's true.
Big facts. It really is. Nothing is more destructive than a human.
Trying to make the world seem like it was gonna have global warming collapses in 2050. You know. But there is, on the opposite hand of that, though, when people talk about things like that and talk about how the world could possibly end or something could be extinct, we have to realize that we hold the power as people to not only work in our communities, but to share information, to share what's going on, and to make responsible choices, and to use our voices to, whether it's going out there and voting, whether it's writing to a city council and trying to see what you can do, even if you're from a small town, to see what you can do to help, whether it's including food boxes in your local park, having some sort of designated, like, real true recycling system, all sorts of ways, and encouraging local businesses to stop using plastic as much as they do, having your grocery store go plastic free, even, it's possible. So
that's the big one.
I'm gonna jump on the soapbox with you. The change starts here.
Starts with us. Snails. Save the snails, and we got to put pressure on those big corporations because they're the biggest wrongdoers. Looking at y'all.
Is we need to use our voices to talk to our mayors, to talk to our local governments, to actually put pressure on our big corporations, because it's not up to the everyday person to be able to save the planet all alone on our backs as a consumer. It's up to our consumer vote and our consumer voice to say, hey, we want to change, to make things more sustainable. Because you'll still be able to have, I think that people take it so black and white. They think that if we were to change the world, well, what happens? The world's gonna end. In 2000, I was in first grade watching the sunset, and it was New Year's Eve, 1999. We're going back to the 1900s, guys. New Year's Eve, 1999. My little sister and I are standing there watching the sunset, and we were crying because we had heard about the Y2K and how it was going to ruin the world. The world was going to end. And we were throwing trash cans into the rivers. And I don't know about you, but Michigan was weird. I was just a little person, and I thought, how crazy is it? The world's going to end. And then the next day I woke up and it was still there. And the next day. And 20 years later, it's still there, and we're still here. And what I learned is that they were right. The world did end. We come from a time, especially as a millennial generation, where we are at a really interesting peak. We remember traditions. We remember a world before cell phones. We remember landlines. We remember playing outside till dusk and coming back when the street lights came on. We remember a totally different era. My dad's calling me. Special guest.
Special guest, Dad.
I'll call.
Yeah. Oh, good.
But it's so important because really all those traditions, though, started to fade as we joined into the era of 2000, into the new millennia. Technology began coming over. We found children were being presented with leapfrog, new technologies of the simpleness of like screen time. An iPad became this thing. This next generation, Generation X, I think they're called, or what is it?
Z. It's a letter. Yeah. Maybe Z. Yeah.
I'm from the 1900s, guys. I can't remember what generation we're on.
Way back in the 1900s, in the late 20th century.
Dude, I can't wait to be 110 and tell my grandchildren how I was born in the late 1900s. Like, I'm gonna milk it my whole life. Move out my way. So what I'm trying to say, though, is that even though we all said the world's ending, the world in that cycle finally ended. The world in the cycle of the way it was before. We had in 2000, we were introduced to modern medicals. We were introduced to new types of sciences, new types of medicines, new types of forms of communication. The internet took off huge. 6 years later, you're finding the rise of MySpace and social media. Facebook takes off. You know, we're seeing such a short time. All of a sudden, just a huge thing. And I remember the change. You know, I remember growing up in a world pre all of this. And then all of a sudden, technology was introduced, and I was so young that I was able to have a bit of this old world and a bit of the new world of being able to interface. And now, at this strange point, it's so funny because I totally understand how we understand the technology side of it, and we totally get what Gen Z is saying about how we need to be sustainable, how we need to communicate, how we need to all talk together. I totally understand what baby boomers are saying of they want tradition, they want to know the good old values, the good old days. But the good old days weren't good. It was
Right.
full of racism. It was full of unsustainability. It was full of nobody cared about snails. I want to get us back on track because I too jumped on the soapbox and went on to say, let's talk about the first witches that actually worked with snails. I want to take us back hundreds of years, going back to the late 17th century, when a witch whose name I have now forgotten had first introduced, she started looking at what happens when snails get excited. When snails get excited or afraid, two things happen. Just similar to a squid, they're cousins in the gastropod family, they eek. Now, when a snail eeks, it's not going to produce a black ink that's going to shoot out of it. Instead, it's going to produce slime. Slime is something that's used to move itself around. So it does produce it, but it also uses that mucus to create more or less depending on if it needs to go. So if a snail gets scared, and think about it, you see a nice slime trail of a snail moving around, the snail gets scared, suddenly there's a huge slime trail and the thing can really
speed.
move. Yep. Turbo snail. Right? When the snail goes turbo, it's an exciting thing. Well,
jet stream.
This first woman, she noticed that the slime, even though it had great effects when put it on the face. So she started taking these nails and she started sticking them right on her eyes, right on her forehead. And you know what she found?
What did she find?
The full looking effects. And if you go back in time, now at this point in time, in the late 1700s, things like not even, any time that somebody came up with something new, industrial, revolutionary, you know what happened? They got hung immediately for being a witch.
With their head.
And that is exactly what happened to our fallen sister. She discovered that snail slime and enzymes have incredible properties of healing our skin, of actually reducing wrinkles, of the appearance of looking younger. And what happened to her? People started coming to her, and other women wanted these sources. Not only was this edible snail, at the time in France, escargot was a really traditional dish where you pour salt on a snail and eat it, I guess. I shouldn't say that in a bad way. I'm sure it's delicious.
Sure.
I just have never tried it yet in this lifeline.
Yeah,
I don't like to eat my snails. But so she had the snail. She was going to eat it. And then she ended up putting some mucus on it. It covers this thing. People start coming around. People get jealous. Throw under the bus. We fast forward another 200 years into the I want to say it's like late 1970s. And suddenly France is industrializing and they're going hard. They're like slime, we have creams. And this is when we start to see in the beauty era, creams and anti-aging really starts to take off in the 80s. And into the 90s, you see it just starts to ballpark. And even today, it's always been a pinnacle of beauty, how to remain ageless. And something that we find in our serums when you look at it is the saline, that snail slime. It's present in a lot of the stuff that we use. And so it's grateful for one woman's innovation and sacrifice, unfortunately, to find that she paved the way for our modern day beauty empire.
Wow. What a pioneer. So
All from a snail.
All from a snail. Little Gayle. So that slime that she was actually using, what its official name is called mucin. And you might see it in a lot of your beauty product ingredients, such as hyaluronic acid or glycoproteins or enzymes. And mucin actually has antimicrobial properties and copper peptides. And copper is often used as an antibacterial, antimicrobial type of thing. So they have these peptides that contain copper, and it gives it these antimicrobial properties. So it can also even be used for clearing up acne, as well as youthfulizing and strengthening your skin. So, and when you think about it, from the perspective of the snail, it totally makes sense. They want to keep the buoyancy, the tension of their muscular foot. They want to keep it from getting infected. If they do end up getting maybe ripped off and they have, a cut or a tear in their unsegmented muscular body, then they don't want that to get infected, because that would be, disastrous to them, and they need to stay smooth and even to glide. So what's good for the snails is also good for us, and I think that just kind of truly highlights the beauty of our ecosystem, right? We're all connected, we all help each other out, and just by being ourselves and doing what's right for us, and that's like the magic of biology.
In my head, I was like, oh, what's good for the slime is good for the soul.
Oh, it is slime for the soul.
I love it so much. So let's see, we've talked about the beauty of snails. We've actually talked about the magic behind snails. We've talked about the science behind snails. I wanted to talk a little bit about if you end up keeping snails. So snails are, and how to create your own biosphere. I had somebody got to me on Facebook, and they were so mad. They saw my little bio ball, and they were like, that snail's being abused. And I was like, no, whoa, why? They said, well, your snail isn't being heated. Your snail doesn't have access to air and energy the way that a proper snail should. And I kind of laughed, because I was like, well, let me tell you something, Larry, from Facebook, from a hamster group that you don't even have a pet snail.
Hamster people, what? Why are they
Facebook group. I have a pet. Side note to all of our viewers, I have a pet hamster. His name is Freddie. He's 8 months old. He's like our favorite little guy. And I was like, this is totally like on a subthread, and somebody had mentioned that they were feeding their hamsters and were feeding their snails, and they're similar vegetables. So I was like, oh yeah, me too. I love snails. Well, keeping a hamster, you have to keep, if you have keep pet snails, you have to keep them out of direct light. First off, you don't want their tanks to overgrow with algae. You don't want to have them bake in a little ball. I keep my pet snail right on my kitchen counter, so it's always warm in the kitchen. It's a great common space where we get to see her when she's growing. I also, in my biosphere, keep multiple plants to create oxygen, and I created literally a biosphere. So I started with a little bit of gravel, sand, and dirt. I added let's see if you can see it the more I zoom in.
Yeah. Oh, I can see it nice and clear. Yes.
There is a amethyst crystal in there, because I'm heady, and I do believe that the snail needs a good crystal to be able to grow. There's 2 aquatic ferns, a Japanese moss ball. We have some lettuce floating in there that's Gayle's food. On top, duckweed floating, and then I have 2 pieces of bamboo in here. And the pieces of bamboo, you can see they have grown. They are growing roots. And all of this creates oxygen in the environment. And it also creates bacteria. It creates a healthy, literally a biosphere for the snail to grow. Japanese trapdoor snails, I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, grow to really big. They'll end up being probably a little smaller than my fist, which is comparable to an apple snail that is local to Florida and southern United States.
Big snail.
So this snail is going to be really big, and in a couple of months here, probably I'm going to have to move her to a bigger glass or vase or tank, whatever, however I'm going to do it. The next biosphere. She'll go on to the next biosphere.
Biosphere 2.
Right. As she grows bigger, she won't change her shell. So unlike, I do believe, the shell grows with the snail, correct? It's a part of it, so it's continuously growing bigger. They don't change it like a crab.
Right. Hermit crabs go find a new home because they have an exoskeleton, so they can leave it. But the snail is attached to it, and it's I think it's made of calcium carbonate as well. And so that allows snails to be a good indicator of rising ocean water temperatures or acidity levels in the water, because calcium carbonate is very susceptible to degradation by acid. Fun fact.
It's so fascinating. I love that snails can tell us so much, and it's so fun to think about how something that's so small, some people get so grossed out or weird about it, and yet they're so cute. I don't know about you, but if you ever just Google, I do. Sometimes late at night, I'll Google snail faces, and oh my goodness, it is the best pick-me-up ever. Snails look like little tiny puppy dogs, I guess, kind of, I want to say. I don't know, it's just like me. They're just cute. I don't know how to say it.
I love them.
They're just cute. They're just adorable. And they're my favorite type of land snail. The largest snail that we have is called the African land snail.
Oh, it's a
And
big
it's
boy.
probably about the shell is actually as big as this candle. It's huge, and you'll see them and they grow, and people will keep them as pets, and they look like little tiny dogs. They're just absolutely adorable. So all kinds of cool snails out there. If you have a pet snail, I would love to know in the comments. If you've ever eaten a snail, I would love to know in the comments. If you've ever used a beauty product that contains mucin, I would love to know the name of that product and list it in the comments. For
Yeah.
all of us at home, if you would like to like, share, and subscribe, tell them how they can connect with us. Nikki?
You can connect with us in our Facebook group, which is In Pursuit of Science Questresses, where we will post a quest of trying out maybe some mucin products or something, a little experiment you can do to get involved with snails. And you can also check us out on our Facebook page, which is In Pursuit of Science, or on YouTube, which is In Pursuit of Science on YouTube, or email us directly, which is In Pursuit of Science at Gmail, which is In Pursuit of Science. Don't forget it.
And also, if you want to listen to Witches in Pursuit of Science, we totally would love it if you could like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and let your friends know that we're here, what we're doing. You have a quest you'd like to send us on, a question or an idea for an episode, or maybe even a spooky story or a tale to add to our grimoire, meaning a tale of witchcraft. Maybe it's a spell, maybe it's a spooky story, something to add to our collection. We would love to hear from you. We absolutely love you guys. We super appreciate you tuning in and checking us out and listening to us and hanging out today, because we're like, we can do it without us. We have to have tea. So cheers to me, cheers to her, and cheers to you, our little friends out there.
Cheers to us all.
Shall we give them the old outro?
Let's do the outro. Let's see if today's the day we get it good.
Right. I honestly have such low hopes, but I don't even care.
One day it'll happen and it'll be great. And until then, it'll be. And
it'll be as it'll be, baby, it'll be. Okay. We who seek
in the laboratory and in the wild
lead lives full of curiosity,
guided by earth-centered hearts and critically observant intellect.
Unified as a community, we learn.
We propose our hypotheses as proudly as we are humble,
expecting no bias in our favor.
We cast our intentions to infinitely expand all understanding,
celebrating diversity within all of our webs,
collectively weaving with a powerful and gentle kindness. We are witches in pursuit of science.
Dang it! I swear, one day we'll do it in unison, and y'all will be like, "Yeah, maybe we'll all do it together."
Yeah. It's just so hard through the internet. I swear, it's the internet, But we'll get it. We can overcome.
Well, witches, ghouls, and goblins, thank you so much for following us today. Blessed be. Stay safe. Stay right, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. We love you.